Seconds. 29.
28 seconds.
27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
20 seconds.
19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12.
11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 what?
Copy.
5 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Hi folks, welcome back to the Scotch Tracker. Today joining us is actor and stand-in Randy James. Welcome Randy, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So looking back, what are your earliest memories of Star Trek?
Well, I was around when the original Star Trek first aired on TV. I was 11. And yeah, for those of you doing math, I am old. I didn't have much say in what we got to watch on our black and white TV at the time, and Dad wasn't too crazy about it. So I didn't really get into it right away. I think I might have been a little bit too young for it at the time. Once in a while, as the series got into it a little bit longer, I would go over to a next door neighbor and watch it in color, which was kind of cool. But it wasn't until I was in high school when the show had already been canceled and it was being shown in syndication on network television, and it was on every day at like 4 o'clock. So I would come home after high school and watch it, and that's when I really got into it. I really started to understand it and really enjoyed it a lot. Being that the show was already canceled, it never occurred to me that one day I might be able to work on Star Trek, because there was no Star Trek for a long time, maybe 15 years between the show and the first movie. So I did become a kind of a big fan of the original series.
That's cool. That is one of the coolest things, that you were able to be a fan and then, be part of it.
It's amazing. And, if I worked on any other show, it would have probably got lost to history. But the fact that it's Star Trek, I mean, it's amazing to me, but people are still watching it virtually every night.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you all.
How did you start working on Star Trek?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story too. In those days, I was doing some extra work. I was starting to be an extra in movies and television, and was hoping to, get my SAG card and that kind of stuff. So back then we didn't have cell phones, any of that stuff. So if you wanted to work, you would call casting agencies a lot. And the biggest one was Central Casting. And you would call up 100 times a day, and many times they didn't pick up the phone at all. But if they were casting, they would sometimes pick up, and they'd say, what's your name? Give me your social. And then they'd say, call back, and hang up. But one day I was doing that, and Andy, I don't know his last name, Andy worked at Central Casting, and I knew him from some other shows I'd worked on. And he said, what are you doing right now, Randy? I said, I'm talking to you on the phone, Andy. And anyway, he asked me some sizes. What's your neck size? What's your shirt size? What's your waist size? Et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, can you be at Paramount this afternoon for a fitting for Star Trek tomorrow? And I said, yeah. So it turned out that someone else had been fitted for the waiter uniform, but they couldn't get a hold of him that day because we didn't have cell phones. And so I got to slide into that uniform, and that's how I got my first gig there. And that was it. There's my green pajamas.
Yeah. How did that? Was it comfortable, or was it restrictive? I'm just very curious about that waiter uniform.
All of the uniforms were relatively comfortable until you had to go to the restroom or something. Because for some reason they made zippers down the front that didn't go down far enough. So you virtually had to kind of, almost disrobe just to do your man thing. So I always thought that was a little bit impractical, but that's how it was.
I wondered how like impractical you found like makeup, basically the makeup used in the show, because I do have like one image where you played a Bajoran. I believe that's it. Yeah.
That's one of the
So
scenes I shouldn't have been in. Sorry. Bajoran makeup was pretty mild, and I rarely
yeah,
did aliens because I didn't like having stuff glued to my face all day.
Hmm.
And since
that's what I thought.
when I was on Deep Space Nine, if they asked me, did I want to be a Klingon the next day, I would say no. There are other people who want to do that, and let them do the job, because I didn't enjoy it. The people who did do it made a lot of money because they would be ridiculous hours. They'd be 4 hours in the makeup chair to be a Klingon or a Jemadar or something like that, and then they would do 12 hours on the set, and then there's another hour of makeup removal, which I have to give hats off to people like Armin Shimmerman and Renee Aubergenois who did that every day. And I mean, not every day, but the days that they worked. I mean, it could not have been comfortable or fun.
So just going back to your first episode, what was going through your mind when they're like, "Oh, we want you on Star Trek," and you're like, "I'm on Star Trek."
So the first day that I arrived there, I did think this was pretty cool. I put on the green uniform and I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, if they can't beam me up, I'm not going. And then I walked over to the stage, and it was early in the morning, so nobody was really around just yet. And I walked onto the set, the 10 Forward Lounge, which had never been seen yet on television. So naturally, I was like, wow. And I looked out the window, and there's this star field, which was basically big curtains with little pieces of tinfoil to look like stars. Anyway, I'm standing there trying to imagine. It's like, okay, I'm on a starship, and this is what that would feel like. And right about then, a guy walked by with a ladder outside the window, completely shattering all illusions. And I thought, okay, well, this is what we're doing. This is TV.
Of the shows you worked on, like TNG and DS9, do you have a favorite of those?
Oh, definitely Deep Space Nine. It's where I lived. It's the best job I ever had. I was there on the first day, and I was there on the last day, and most of the days in between. And there are very, very few people in the world who can say that. I know I'm the only stand-in who made it that long. And the people you would think would be there throughout, like the camera crew or whatever, we changed camera crews third season. So except for maybe I think Judy Brown, the script supervisor, and maybe one or two other people might have been there the entire time, but I can't think of very many people who were.
Yeah, and what was the set like? Because you're talking about the illusion of being on a starship, but I've always heard that the DS9 set felt different. Like it felt like it was more expansive.
It did. To this day, I can't believe that they're gone, because they were massive. We had 3 stages that we used. Stage 4 was where ops was, and the cargo bay, and some hallways, and everybody's quarters. And then stage 17, right next door, was the promenade, which I always said, and I believe it was true, that it was the largest standing permanent set in Hollywood. And it literally filled an entire soundstage, wall to wall to wall, and ceiling to floor. They had the second floor up there where you'd walk up the steps and you could look out the observation deck and see the stars and stuff. It was an amazing thing. It didn't feel like a set. And then when they finally were gone, that felt really wrong. To To me, if it was me, I would have left those sets up and charged people to go in for the Paramount tour. But
I would have paid. I would be all over that.
yeah.
So we've got a few images. I wondered if you wanted to speak about them.
Okay. That looks like the one from Times Orphan, I think. Yeah. When I had my biggest part, which was 3 or 4 lines instead of 1. But that was a good day.
So is that one from this one from Times Orphan as well?
Correct.
Ah, right. Okay.
That was one of the few episodes where I mentioned Lieutenant Jones because I said Jones to security on that one. And then I was disappointed that they didn't put Jones in the credit. They put guard or security. It was always that.
Ah, right. Okay.
Kevin Grievous was the other guy in that shot. He later did, oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the show right now, but he had a speaking role in a movie a couple of years later. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it right now.
No problem.
That was when we were arresting Rumpelstiltskin.
Oh, right. Yeah. Was that first season?
Yeah,
Or-
Fishes for Horses.
Right. Yes.
Yes, it was first. Yes, it was first season. Interesting note about that episode, because of so many visual effects in the episode, they hired Rob Legato, who was our special effects supervisor, to be the director on that episode. I'm not sure if it was the first episode he ever directed, but I think it was. The reason I think that's interesting is because he later won an Oscar for visual effects on Titanic. When I saw the movie in the theater and I saw his name go by on a separate card, I was pretty impressed. So yeah, there's a lot of talent that worked on Deep Space Nine that went on to do other things.
Yeah.
That was my first line right there. Chief O'Brien's orders.
Cool. Yeah, I really like this picture.
Yeah, that was the Trials and Tribulation episode. That was my camera, but I think maybe Terry Farrell took that picture. I couldn't swear to it.
Oh,
I have to
discuss that one.
Yeah, I have to ask, what was it like working with Renee? Because in this show, he is quite intimidating.
That's a good question.
Renee was a great guy. He was very, very supportive to work with. It was funny working on Deep Space Nine with all the aliens that you worked with, because I felt like I was friends with Odo. I mean, Odo would walk in the room and it was like, hey, there's a friendly face. And then whenever I'd see Renee, it was like I didn't know him. Which happened to me with several of the actors a couple of times. But what am I trying to say? Going from background to principal was almost impossible. The powers that be really didn't want it to happen. I don't know the why of that, but I know it's true. So when that part came up, the guard had one line and didn't die. Vanita Ozols Graham came to me and said, Randy, there's a guard in the next episode and he doesn't die and he has a line. And I said, cool. And she said, that should be you. And I said, yeah, but they won't agree with you. And so anyway, she went to bat for me and I wasn't there, but the story she tells is that her and David Livingston, one of the producers on the show, were discussing this. And David was a nice guy too. He liked me well enough. They were discussing whether or not that should be me. And Rick Berman came in and said, what? And she explained what she was talking about. Randy plays the guard in all these episodes. We had just done Wishes Were Horses with the shot that you just saw. And Rick said, bring him in, let him read. Well, I was really surprised about that. So I did get my first audition for one line, Chief O'Brien's orders, and I didn't get the part, which did not surprise me. A couple days later, Vanita came to me and she said, Randy, you're going to love this. She said, the guy who got the part got a commercial the day before he's supposed to work on Deep Space Nine. But if he gets a second day, it's going to be you. So I was literally on the bubble for an entire week, wondering if and I wasn't supposed to even tell anybody. I mean, this was just a big deal. They didn't really want to make an actor, is kind of how they thought, even though I've done Shakespeare, you know what I mean? I've done plays in other places that none of them saw. But at any rate, so through the sake of chance, I did get to do the part. And that was the first one. It was 5 years to the day, which is really weird, before I got my second line. And I'm trying to remember which show that was. I think it was Chrysalis. At any rate, 5 years later, I got a line again. And you know, I was there the whole time in between. But that's how it goes.
Right. Okay.
So I was reading that you were basically standing for
O'Brien.
Yeah, Colmini. That's Miles O'Brien. So I wondered how that came about, basically.
Well, you know, he had small parts on Next Generation where I already worked, and the main actors on all the shows have their own stand-in. A person who's hired to be their stand-in, and they're pretty much the stand-in every time that they're available. Being a smaller character, Colum didn't have that stand-in. So if you were an extra on the set that day, they might grab you and have you stand in if you were the right size or whatever. So I first started standing in for O'Brien on Next Generation. And that was key to me getting the future job, because when they were casting Deep Space Nine, I knew that Colum and Keiko were going to be the characters that went over to that show. A lot of the extras were going to Marvin Rush, who was the director of photography on both shows. He was on Next Gen, and then he moved over to Deep Space Nine. He would be key in choosing stand-ins. So other people were going to him and asking him, and the answer they got was, I don't have a cast. I don't know what I need yet. But I knew that O'Brien was cast. And so I went to him and I mentioned that I had been standing in for O'Brien, and he said, good, go talk to Benita. And I went and talked to Benita, and she said, you know Marvin? And he said, okay, you're hired. So, and it turned in to be a great job for me, because Colum obviously was a regular, but when he wasn't there, because I'm such a normal height, I would stand in for Ducat, or I would stand in for Garrick, or I would stand in for whatever guest star we had that week. So I was on the set more than any of those actors were, because they had days off and I was doing other things.
Cool. Yeah, I wondered like how this came about, basically, this image. I believe it's from the episode Identity Crisis.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Which we spoke with previously on this channel. We spoke with Ronald B. Moore, who worked in visual effects, and cited that episode as his favourite episode. But yeah, just regarding your part in it, I wondered how it came about.
I honestly have no idea.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
That's interesting.
But you did mention earlier you had a funny story about Quark on the beach.
I do.
Which,
you ready to
which
hear
sounds,
that one?
that would be amazing.
This is one of my favorite stories. We were doing, obviously, the Ryza episode, which we were shooting at a fairly secluded beach in Malibu. And at one point in the afternoon, Armin came up to the AD and said, "I'm going to walk up to the pier." And she looked at him kind of funny because he's in full makeup and costume. And I said, "Well, I'm not working until the scene he's working in, so I'll go with him." And I was in street clothes that day. And she said, "Okay," which I was surprised they didn't tell him no. But anyway, pardon me. Armin and I start walking up the sidewalk, if there is one, on the Pacific Coast Highway. And I had always said that in Los Angeles, I don't know what it would take to get people's attention. I mean, you could pretty much be a Ferengi walking down the street and maybe nobody would notice. Well, we kind of proved that as we're walking up the Pacific Coast Highway there. People are driving by and Armin's just chatting away, not paying any attention, but I'm kind of noticing if drivers are, nobody's even noticing, which is just not that weird. At any rate, we get up to the pier and there's a restaurant there. We took a couple of pictures. And then Armin said, "Let's walk back on the beach," which I thought was a better idea. It's kind of less public. Anyway, we get to the beach, and this lady that's in that picture, she stands up. She'd obviously never seen a Ferengi before, and she said, "Oh, what is it you're doing?" And Armin, without missing a beat, said, "I used to swim at this beach when I was a kid, and this is what happened." I thought it was hilarious.
I like that. Yeah, that's good.
I've noticed you're in DS9 episode "The Way of the Warrior," and I believe there was a story about like that episode where you appear in two different scenes.
Yeah, that never should have happened, and I tried to avoid it. But the reason it happened was Way of the Warrior was a 2-part episode, which we shot basically as 2 episodes. In fact, they show it as 2 episodes after the first time. So each episode has a director and a first AD. And while one is shooting, the other one is prepping for the next episode. And so Brian Whitley was the AD on the scene with Ducat on the Defiant there, and I knew that I was featured in that because he talked about me. Does this guy need to be following me around with a gun? Anyway, so when we shot the second part of it, it was a different AD. It was BC Cameron, who wasn't present when we did the other thing and didn't know anything about it. Mm-hmm. So I suspected that the Defiant was not back yet because Quarks was so empty, and I just knew I probably shouldn't be there. But she said she wanted me to sit in that chair, and I went up to her and I said, "Is the Defiant back yet?" And she thinks about it for about a second and goes, "Yeah, the Defiant's back." So I said, "Okay." And I went and sat in the chair and got up as Garrett came to sit down in it. Well, I had no idea because I didn't have a script to look at. Not only should I not be there, it was a direct cut. It goes from me on the Defiant to me getting out of my chair and walking away. A lot of people have noticed it. To me, it's a gaffe, but it's kind of fun now. I think after that, the producers thought I was trying to be in every shot, and that just wasn't the case at all. But anyway.
All right. Another question I had was, like, if CBS called you, like, tomorrow or whatever, and invited you to appear in one of the modern Star Trek shows, would you be interested in appearing?
I'll be honest, that would be a tough one. I mean, if it was a one-off thing, if they wanted me to be a guest star or whatever, I would probably have to do that. If they wanted me to be a regular, which is highly unlikely, I would have to seriously think about it because, I'm considerably older and the hours are seriously brutal. So I'm not sure that I'd want to do that, but they can ask me if they want.
So out of the cast members that you were able to work with, do you have any like particular favorites of people that you just thought they were always funny, they were always nice whenever I was on set?
That would be Armin Shimmerman.
Okay.
Yeah. Armin was one of the greatest guys ever. He always was in support of the little guy. He was so excited when I got a part. And in fact, Armin and I are personal friends. We lived not real far from each other. And he asked me a couple times to babysit his dogs and stuff. And I did that. So, I mean, in fact, I'm going to see him next month in Las Vegas. So,
Oh, that's cool.
Armin is the one really good, solid friend that I made on the show as far as the cast goes. Sid was the other one, and we used to play golf and whatnot until probably he started seeing Nana, and then I didn't see as much of him. I haven't been able to keep in touch with him, but Sid was a great guy as well.
That's cool.
Is this going to be edited at all?
No, I think we're live, so everybody's seeing how the magic is happening.
There's a lot of I've noticed there's a lot of support for you in the chat. Like,
I'm sorry.
Randy, etc.
Oh, that's cool. Hashtag Team Randy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I like it. That's a guy that I used to work with.
Cool. I would glad also that you appeared, or at least played a part in the film Star Trek First Contact. I wondered if you had any memories about that.
Oh, yeah. A few of them.
Great.
Jonathan Frakes was another great guy, by the way. I really, really like Jonathan a lot. He was. It's funny when you're an extra, you're the bottom of the food chain, and a lot of actors really don't even want to talk to you. It's just the way it is. Jonathan, Brent Spiner, Sid, Armin, they were all exceptions to that rule. Jonathan always knew everybody's name. He'd always say, "Hey, Randy, how you feel? Hey, Joe, how you doing?" I mean, he was just a really good, friendly guy who realized that we were all people. So when First Contact started, we were working on Deep Space Nine, and Jonathan had a regular stand-in, like I mentioned before, but that stand-in was over in England. His mother was sick or something. So I left a note in Jonathan's trailer saying that congratulations for getting the movie, and if there was any way I could be involved, I would love to do that. So one of the coolest things ever, he actually went to our unit production manager on Deep Space and made sure that if he hired me to be his stand-in temporarily until his other guy got back, that he wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to lose my job. And I mean, that job was worth a lot to me. So I thought that was just an amazing thing that he did. And obviously I got permission. So I stood in for Frakes just for the first 2 weeks, I think. We went to Arizona. Mm-hmm. We worked in an actual missile silo. It's where they were keeping the Phoenix. That was amazing. It's a nuclear missile silo. I mean, you ever been in one? I never had. So that was really cool. And then we did the scenes up in the mountains, which was above LA. And I actually beamed down to the planet with Captain Picard and Brent. I don't remember who all was in the
Crusher was there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that particular night was going to be a night shoot, which means you start at sundown and shoot till sunup, basically. My call, I didn't have to come in until 10 p.m. Well, that particular night was kind of drizzly and foggy and rainy, and it was up in the mountains on a 2-lane road. And it was so foggy that I swear I couldn't even see the road. I was driving by the line on the highway that you could only see about 3. Seriously, if I wasn't beaming down that night, I would have called in and said sorry.
Yeah.
But I thought beaming down with the captain was pretty important, so I did go on up there. And I did do that.
Cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. Do you have any favorite like memories other than maybe the beach story that just you're like, oh, and that's I always love thinking about that, or I wish I could go back to that moment.
Nothing comes to mind for that type of feeling. Another, what I think is a humorous story, and it was almost you had to be there, but there was the episode where we found out that Tane was Garrick's father. Isn't that right?
Oh,
Anyway.
right. Yep.
Anyway, so we're shooting that episode, and it was a heavy Garrick episode, and poor Andy had been in his costume and makeup for probably close to 16 hours at that point. It was about 2:00 in the morning, and we weren't done. So they really needed to get Andy out of his makeup. I mean, they were already paying him ridiculous overtime, I think. At any rate, they had to get him out of his makeup, but they still had to shoot the matching over the shoulder shot. When you shoot a shot over someone's shoulder, typically there's a matching shot over the other actor's shoulder so that you go back and forth, right? Well, so Andy's now out of his uniform, and they said, Randy, put on the jacket. So I did. First of all, that jacket was made over a wetsuit. I'm not kidding.
Oh,
literally
geez.
over a wetsuit. So it was like the most, you could not breathe in that thing. I don't know how Andy wore it with makeup on for as long as he did. I just don't know. But at any rate, I put the jacket on. And so they're going to shoot over my shoulder, but I obviously don't have the Cardassian neck thing going on, right? So we had to be really careful to just show a piece of the shoulder and not the neck. So Andy gets behind me. He's doing his part. And he gets behind me, and I have to lean my head like this. So, and then he grabs my shoulders, and he's working me like, like they're his shoulders. But I swear I felt like my shoulders were seriously overacting. I mean, I don't think that if it was him, his shoulders would have been as active. Anyway, I mean, it just felt like a hilarious puppet show at 2:00 in the morning that nobody got to see, but I thought it was pretty fun.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome.
We've had a question in the chat, but I don't know how appropriate it is. It's like basically asking what your thoughts are on HBO.
My thoughts on HBO?
Yeah.
I love HBO. Why?
Yeah. That's a very specific question.
But I don't know why.
I'm wondering that too. I think, yeah, it's a good network. Yeah. It's HBO.
I watch it a lot. Yeah. They don't show Star Trek, though.
No, they don't, unfortunately.
It's
but it's on every other
Heroes and Icons. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I think in the States it's Heroes and Icons, the name of the channel. It's one channel that plays Star Trek, at least.
Oh, well, it's on every streamer. It's on Netflix, I'm pretty sure. I know it's on Amazon. I know it's on Hulu. I mean, it's pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, it is. Which is, I'll be like, side note, like, I love the fact I can just boot up Netflix and watch any Star Trek pretty much. And it's,
Yep.
it's right
I
there.
like that too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So here's a good question then from Taylor. Who would you cast as like a modern day you if they like rebooted the series?
Wow. That's a great question. I've never thought about it before. I don't know. Most of the young actors, I don't even know their names. I'm sure they'd cast somebody young that I've never heard of.
It's a pretty fascinating question.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer.
So, like, do you ever like watch Star Trek and like catch yourself and like in an episode or whatever, and it brings back memories of shooting that episode?
Of course. I mean, and I don't watch it very often, I have to be honest with you. In fact, I'll sometimes see a shot from a screenshot from an episode, and I'm like, I don't remember that one at all. Because, I mean, it was a really long time ago. We ended the show 20 years ago. We started it almost 30. So, But yes, just looking at any of the sets, especially on Deep Space Nine, just takes me back. I mean, I felt like I lived on the promenade for 7 years.
Cool.
That's really cool.
So you're working on anything like nowadays you'd like to promote?
No, I'm retired and I love it.
Well, that's good. Those of you are enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm trying. COVID made it a little difficult. In fact, COVID kind of stepped up the retirement. I wasn't going to retire probably till this year, but once I got laid off of my job, I thought, well, I might as well. So it's all great.
Do you have any exciting plans for, I guess, post-COVID? Is that what we're calling it, or
I'm
whatever
actually
the new normal is?
Yeah. Well, and gosh, I hope that we're post, but sadly, I don't think we are yet. I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm not afraid, but I'm afraid of the next variant if they don't get it if people don't get their vaccinations. I'm going to my first Star Trek
right. Yeah, you said
Vegas convention, and next week in Las Vegas. I am not working. I'm not signing. I kind of wish I was. I did kind of make an attempt at that, but it didn't work out. So every year it's pretty much the same week as my birthday, and I see all these pictures of all of those people together, and I'm not there, and I feel like I should be. So this year I decided that I'm going to go ahead and go. I've got a room booked for the first 2 nights, and I have a cousin who lives in Vegas, so I'll figure out the rest. But anyway, I'm going to go to the convention. So if any of you are there and you know who I am and you recognize me, please say hi, but I won't be sitting at a table.
One day I hope to get there. It's on my list.
Yeah, well, I always figured, I mean, there's no way that I'm paying to go to a convention. That just feels wrong to me. It's like I don't need to pay to go see my friends, but so I do have a pass to get in, which is great. But and I'm paying for my own room, obviously. But it just seems like a place I should be. In fact, the last time I saw Aaron here in Denver, we do Starfest here in Denver, and so I've seen Jonathan Frakes, I've seen the Three Ferengis, I've seen J.G. Hertzler, and Terry Farrell have all been here at different times. So it's really fun for me to do that. But the last time I saw Aaron and the last time I saw Renee, I did not know it would be the last time. So I really feel like I should just go. And I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. I hope they remember who I am.
I was wondering if you've seen like any of the what nowadays is called like the Kelvin Timeline Star Trek universe films. It's called like Chris Pine portraying Captain Kirk. So
I actually like those movies and that cast to a point. I mean, some of it's a little ridiculous, but no. When I saw the first one in a packed theater and everybody loved it, and what was this, 10 years ago now? I said,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, 11 years ago.
I was excited. I said, this makes Star Trek cool again. And I know there's a lot of people who worked on my generation of Star Trek who think that, they reject the whole thing out of hand. But what I noticed was that it brought a lot of new fans to the franchise. People saw those movies and thought, this is cool, and then went back and watched the old shows. So I think it helped everybody overall. As far as the new shows go, I don't watch Discovery. I watch like 1 or 2 episodes, and I was not going to read Klingon subtitles all night long. I'm sorry. I did. And yet another face for Klingons. I just couldn't get into it at all. So no.
Yeah, I think I'm enjoying it, but I'm with you that okay, the Enterprise solved that issue with the foreheads, and now there's a new problem. But
it's funny, it's cool that Enterprise did fix that, because that whole issue made me reject Enterprise after the pilot. I saw the wrong Klingon in 80 years before Kirk, and I was just like, no, you can't do that. And then they fixed it. So
yeah,
good for them. But
Well, I was thinking about how it's the differences in appearance in Klingons is referred to in um, one of the episodes we showed the image of, namely Trials and Tribulations, where Worf basically says we don't talk about why the reason is.
Yeah, it was
That
a
was
funny.
funny, yep.
Yeah, it was a good little joke to kind of say we acknowledge it, but we're not going to explain it.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
a good choice. Trials and Tribulations, when we were doing it, I said, you guys, this is the coolest thing we've ever done. It might be the coolest thing we ever do. And I mean, I'm not even a huge fan of the original Tribble episode. I thought it was kind of silly, to be honest. But I loved what they did with it, the way they put it together. And I thought that was really cool. In fact, I don't remember if you can see me in that episode, but I did work on it as when O'Brien's putting on his boots and it close up of his hands putting on the boots. That was me. Little ways like that, but I
hand
can't
double.
remember. Yeah, I was O'Brien's hand double in a lot of shots. If you saw the hands but not his face in the same shot, it was probably me.
So was it true that you weren't allowed to touch the control panel? Because I heard that somewhere. I don't know if I'm making that up. That characters were not allowed to touch the control panels because of the fingerprints or something. But,
I would say that's not true. No.
Okay, that's good to know.
I touched them all the time. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I was thinking back as well on some of like Garrett Wong's comments that he was on the set of Star Trek Voyager, and he was talking about how like alien, like in the emotionality levels, basically like aliens were allowed so much range, whereas if you were playing a human, you had to be like constrained, sort of thing. So I wondered if there was anything like that for even like being a background performer.
Yeah, I mean, they always wanted it to be pretty serious if you were Starfleet. I mean, that's sort of the feeling I got. In fact, the first time I had a line, I just gave it real straight, Chief O'Brien's orders. But I really felt like, because I had read the script, that it should have been something more like Chief O'Brien's orders. In other words, everybody's acting weird. And when I actually suggested, Cliff Bull was the director. He's also passed on. I asked him if he wanted to see another take, and he goes, "You want to make a big deal out of this?" And I said, "Nope," and I went home after one take.
Was that the mutiny episode? Dan, I can't think of the name.
Dramatist for something.
Right. Okay.
Oh, Ds9. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a weird episode, I thought, because it was done too early in the show. It was the end of first season, and it was basically the idea was that everybody was acting strangely. For example, Kira had a crush on Odo. Well, 5 years later, that wasn't that strange. So I thought that one came a little bit too early in the series.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was a weird. It was interesting, but weird.
Did you ever play a Borg? Because someone in the chat asked how it was.
I played a Borg one day on a second unit on the very first Borg episode on Next Generation. They had already shot it, and it was the first time they did Borg makeup, and all of that stuff that they have. And some people were really struggling with it because they did a really, really long day. Anyway, they called me and asked me if I would do it for one day, and I said sure. And they kept coming to me and asking me if I was okay. And I'll tell you what's weird is they wanted to glue a thing over my mouth. My mouth would be, and they actually put it over, but I wouldn't let them glue it because there was no way I was not going to be able to open my mouth for an entire day. It wasn't a real long day. Funny story about that day, though. I was in the makeup trailer, and Patrick Stewart was also in the makeup trailer, and he was being made up as a Borg. Now, remember that no one in the world had ever seen a Borg outside of Paramount at that time. because it hadn't aired yet. So so Patrick is sitting there getting made up, and a group of tourists came by with a tour guide and kind of stood outside the trailer for just a moment. The tours are really bad because there's all these cool sets that you don't get to go see. But anyway, this group of young tourists were standing outside the trailer, and Patrick, without saying a word, he just got up out of his seat and walked out and went, "Ah!" with his Borg makeup on, and then just came back in and sat down and laughed. It was pretty.
Oh, that's awesome.
You have a question, a final question, Chris?
So was that, sorry, the episode you were in, that was Best of Both Worlds? I'm just trying to think of what scene.
Are you talking about me as a Bajoran?
Sorry, as a Borg.
Oh, as a Borg.
Honestly, it was the very first episode where you ever saw a Borg on Next Generation, and I'm sorry, but I don't know the name.
Q-Who.
Oh yeah, Q-Who then. Okay. Cool. I'm just trying to think back. Okay, what are all the Borgs did we see? What Borgs did we see?
Oh, and I don't think I ever got on camera. I don't think you can see me in that episode, and even I wouldn't recognize me. You know what I mean? It was just one of those where they had one Borg just in case they needed another shot, kind of a deal. So I don't, and I wasn't. It wasn't a long day for me that day. Okay. I have a photo somewhere, but I don't have those photos in this device I'm using.
So, what would you say was the most stressful aspect of being on the series?
Good question.
I would say the hours in general, because they were ridiculously long. And I guess while we were doing that, I thought that all 1 hour dramas did those kinds of hours. But it was interesting because Bill Mooney, the original Will Robinson, he guested on our show. And I saw an interview with him. I actually stood in for Bill, and I'm Facebook friends with him now. He's a great guy. They did an interview with Bill about his guesting on Deep Space Nine, and he was a regular on Babylon 5 at the time, which was a real similar show. In fact, he did alien makeup all day long, but he was shocked at our hours. And he talked about everybody looking like zombies. And I mean, I don't know what it was about that show, but I mean, if you think about it, we had aliens, we had phaser fire, we had spaceships, and we had to do all of that in 8 days. So, I mean, with a movie, if you don't get the day's work done, you can maybe add another day. On a TV show, you can't do that. You have to finish the day because they've got to finish the episode. So I think overall the hours were just insane. I know there were a lot of times people, wives of the crew, would be calling at 2:00 in the morning and say, "Is my husband really still working?" So, I mean, I think seriously it was hard on marriages and all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that behind the scenes that it was pretty tough on that.
Other than that, I mean, it was fun, though. You know, it was a great show to work on. Everybody was cool. It was like a big family. It really was.
I thought it was a cool comment Taylor posted in the conversation in the chat. Did you ever imagine that this many years later they're still making movies and spin-offs? And how does that feel to have had a part in such a huge legacy?
I never did imagine, and I think it's awesome. I do participate in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine fan page on Facebook. And I mean, I'm amazed that it's 20 years later, but there are people still watching it virtually every night. Mm-hmm. And those are the people who know who I am and who know who Lieutenant Jones is. But, you know, God love them. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of people do a TV show and never get a residual because there's never any reruns. And I still, you know, my residual checks are small, but I'm still getting them 20 years later.
It's really definitely been a pleasure. It's definitely been a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much for coming on, Randy.
Yeah,
thank you for having me. This was really fun. Nobody's ever even asked me before. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, this has been really cool.
And thanks for joining the conversation as well, Chris. And thanks to our viewers. Please remember to like and subscribe to the video. And we'll see you next time on the Scotch Trekker. Track you later.
Take care, guys.
Take care, everybody.